Welcome back tonight to New Hampshire. The Democratic debate continues here on ABC. And Secretary Clinton, we want to turn to race now in America. There is a real concern in this country from Black Lives Matter and from other community groups that we're just now seeing with smartphones and cell phones what many have been dealing with for years when they come in contact with police. But you also have many in law enforcement who now say there's been a so-called Ferguson effect, police holding back because they're afraid of backlash. In fact, the FBI director calling it a chill wind blowing through American law enforcement. So if elected president, how would you bridge the divide between the two?
David, I think this is one of the most important challenges facing not just our next president, but our country. We have systemic racism and injustice and inequities in our country, and in particular in our justice system, that must be addressed and must be ended. I feel very strongly that we have to reform our criminal justice system, and we have to find ways to try to bring law enforcement together again with the communities that they are sworn to protect. Trust has been totally lost in a lot of places. At the same time, we know that in many parts of our country, police officers are bridging those divides, and they're acting heroically. The young officer who was killed responding to the Planned Parenthood murders, the officer who told the victims of the San Bernardino killings that he would take a bullet before them. So I think that we need to build on the work of the Policing Commission that President Obama impaneled. We need to get a bipartisan commitment to work together on this. And we need to hear the voices of those men and women and boys and girls who feel like strangers in their own country, and do whatever is necessary to not only deal with the immediate problems within the criminal justice system, but more opportunities, more jobs, better education, so that we can begin to rebuild that very valuable asset known as trust.
Secretary, thank you. Governor O'Malley, how would you bridge the divide?
Look, there is no issue in American public policy that I have worked on more day in and day out than this painful issue of policing, of law enforcement, criminal justice, and race in America. When I ran in 1999, David, for mayor of Baltimore, our city by that year had become the most addicted, violent, and abandoned in America. But we came together. I brought people together over some very deep racial divides, and we were able to put our city on a path for the biggest reduction in crime of any major city in America over the next 10 years. As governor, we continued to work together. We reduced violent crime to 30-year lows, but get this, we also reduced incarceration rates to 20-year lows. So it is possible, actually, to find the things that actually work, that we did, increasing drug treatment, using big data to better protect the lives of young people, cut juvenile crime in half, and it's also possible to improve how we police our police. Look, there wasn't a single day as mayor of Baltimore that I wasn't asked whether I was delivering on the promise I made to police the police. We reported excessive force, discourtesy, use of lethal force. In fact, drove down to 3 of the 4 lowest years on record, police use of lethal force. As a nation, we have to embrace this moment and make our departments more open, more transparent, and more accountable. Just as we require every major department, every county to report its major crimes, we should require police departments to report their discourtesy, brutality, excessive force. There's so much work that can be done, so much we've learned to do better. We need to do it now as a nation. This is our time and our opportunity to do that.
Governor, thank you. And Senator Sanders, when you hear the FBI director calling it a chill wind blowing through American law enforcement, does that concern you as well when you...
Well, this whole issue concerns me, and I agree with much of what the Secretary and the Governor have said. But let's be clear. Today in America, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. 2.2 million people, predominantly African American and Hispanic. We are spending $80 billion a year locking up our fellow Americans. I think, and this is not easy, but I think we need to wage a major effort to come together as a country and end institutional racism. We need major, major reforms of a very broken criminal justice system. Now, what does that mean? Well, for a start, it means that police officers should not be shooting unarmed people, predominantly African Americans. It means that we have to rethink the so-called war on drugs, which has destroyed the lives of millions of people, which is why I have taken marijuana out of the Controlled Substance Act, so that it will not be a federal crime. That is why we need to make police, and I speak as a former mayor. I was a mayor for 8 years, worked very closely with the great police department. And what we did is try to move that department toward community policing so that the police officers become part of the community and not, as we see in some cities, an oppressive force. We need to make police departments look like the communities they serve in terms of diversity. We need to end minimal sentencing. We need basically to pledge that we're going to invest in this country in jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration.
Senator, thank you. We want to turn now to an issue. This next issue has destroyed so many families across the country, and in particular right here in New Hampshire, heroin. And there's a stunning new figure out. A recent poll, 48% here in this state alone say they know someone who has abused heroin. We're going to turn tonight to Dan Toohey of the New Hampshire Union Leader, who has this question.
New Hampshire has been hard hit by the heroin epidemic. We're on track to have twice as many overdose deaths this year as in 2013. What specifically would you do to address this crisis?
Senator Sanders, I'm going to take this to you first because you've seen what's happened with heroin right on the border in your own state.
Look, this is a tragedy for New Hampshire. It is a tragedy for my state of Vermont. It is a tragedy all over this country. The number of heroin deaths are growing very, very significantly. What do we do? Well, for a start, this may seem like a radical idea, but I think we have got to tell the medical profession and doctors who are prescribing opiates and the pharmaceutical industry that they have got to start getting their act together. We cannot have this huge number of opiates out there throughout this country where young people are taking them, getting hooked, and then going to heroin. Second of all, and the reason that I believe in a healthcare for all program, we need to understand that addiction is a disease, not a criminal activity. And that means radically changing the way we deal with mental health and addiction issues. When somebody is addicted and seeking help, they should not have to wait 3-4 months in order to get that help. They should be able to walk in the door tomorrow and get a variety of treatments that work for them. So those are some of the areas that I think we've got to move on.
Senator, thank you. Secretary Clinton?
You know, on my very first visit to New Hampshire in this campaign, I was in Keene, and I was asked, what are you going to do about the heroin epidemic? And all over New Hampshire, I met grandmothers who are raising children because they've lost the father or the mother to an overdose. I met young people who are desperately trying to get clean and have nowhere to go because there are not enough facilities. So this is a major epidemic, and it has hit New Hampshire and Vermont particularly hard. I've had 2 town halls, one in Keene, one in Laconia, dedicated exclusively to talking about what we can do, and I've heard some great ideas about how law enforcement is changing its behavior, how the recovery community is really reaching out. And I was proud to get the endorsement of Mayor Walsh of Boston, who has made his struggle with alcoholism a real clarion call for action in this arena. So I've laid out a 5-point plan about what we can do together. I would like the federal government to offer $10 billion over 10 years to work with states, and I really applaud Governor Hassan for taking up this challenge and working with the legislature here to come up with a plan. We have to do more on the prescribing end of it. There are too many opioids being prescribed, and that leads directly now to heroin addiction. And we have to change the way we do law enforcement. And of course, we need more programs and facilities. So when somebody is ready to get help, there's a place for them to go. And every law enforcement should carry the antidote to overdose, naloxone, so that they can save lives that are on the brink of expiring.
Secretary,
David,
thank you.
I actually
Governor.
know a great deal about this issue. And I have a dear friend, played music with him for years. Remember when he came home with his baby girl, and now she's no longer with us because of addiction and overdose. My last time in New Hampshire, I had to take a break shortly after landing and call home and comfort a friend whose mother died of an overdose. Drugs have taken far too many of our citizens. It's a huge public health challenge. In our own city, I mentioned before, we have become the most addicted city in America, but together every single year, I expanded drug treatment funding in our city, and then I expanded it in our state, and we were saving lives every single year, doing the things that work, intervening earlier, understanding the continuum of care that's required until we got hit, like every other state, in the United States, especially in New Hampshire and in the Northeast, with this opioid addiction, the overprescribing. I agree we need better. We need to rein in the overprescribing, but I have put forward on my plan a $12 billion federal investment. We have to invest in the local partnerships, and the best place to intervene, the best indicator of when a person is actually on the verge of killing themselves because of an addiction, is at the hospital. That very first time they show up with a near miss, we should be intervening there. That's what I said to my own public health people. What would we do if this were Ebola? How would we act? So many more Americans have been killed by the combination of heroin and these highly addictive pain pills, and yet we refuse to act. There are things that can be done. Go onto my website. My plan is there. It's one of 15 strategic goals I've set out to make our country a better place by cutting these sorts of deaths in half in the next 5 years.
Governor O'Malley, thank you. Martha?
Secretary Clinton, I want to circle back to something that your opponents here have brought up. Libya is falling apart. The country is a haven for ISIS and jihadists, with an estimated 2,000 ISIS fighters there today. You advocated for that 2011 intervention and called it smart power at its best. And yet even President Obama said the U.S. should have done more to fill the leadership vacuum left behind. How much responsibility do you bear for the chaos that followed elections?
Well, first, let's remember why we became part of a coalition to stop Gaddafi from committing massacres against his people. The United States was asked to support the Europeans and the Arab partners that we had, and we did a lot of due diligence about whether we should or not, and eventually, yes, I recommended and the president decided that we would support the action to protect civilians on the ground, and that led to the overthrow of Gaddafi. I think that what Libya then did by having a full, free election, which elected moderates, was an indication of their crying need and desire to get on the right path. Now, the whole region has been rendered unstable, in part because of the aftermath of the Arab Spring, in part because of the very effective outreach and propagandizing that ISIS and other terrorist groups do. But what we're seeing happening in Libya right now is that there has been a fragile agreement to put aside the differences that exist among Libyans themselves to try to dislodge ISIS from Sirte, the hometown of Gaddafi, and to begin to try to create a national government. This is not easy work. We did a lot to help. We did as much as we could because the Libyans themselves had very strong feelings about what they wished to accept. But we're always looking for ways about what more we can do to try to give people a chance to be successful.
Secretary Clinton, I want to go back, but that government lacked institutions and experience. It had been a family business for 40 years. On the security side, we offered only a modest training effort and a very limited arms buyback program. Let me ask you the question again. How much responsibility do you bear for the chaos that followed those elections?
Martha, we offered a lot more than they were willing to take. We offered a lot more. We also got rid of their chemical weapons, which was a big help. And we also went after a lot of the shoulder-fired missiles to round them up. We can't, if we're not going to send American troops, which there was never any idea of doing that, then to try to send trainers, to try to send experts is something we offered, Europeans offered. the UN offered, and there wasn't a lot of responsiveness at first. I think a lot of the Libyans who had been forced out of their country by Gaddafi, who came back to try to be part of a new government, believed they knew what to do, and it turned out that they were no match for some of the militaristic forces inside that country. But I'm not giving up on Libya, and I don't think anybody should. We've been at this
But
a
were
couple of
mistakes
years.
made?
Well, there's always a retrospective to say what mistakes were made, but I know that we offered a lot of help, and I know it was difficult for the Libyans to accept help. What we could have done if they had said yes would have been a lot more than what we were able to have done.
Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders.
Look, the Secretary is right. This is a terribly complicated issue. There are no simple solutions. But where we have a disagreement is that I think if you look at the history of regime changes, you go back to Mossadegh in Iran, you go back to Salvador Allende, who we overthrew in Chile, you go back to overthrowing Saddam Hussein in Iraq, you go back to where we are today in Syria with a dictator named Assad. The truth is, it is relatively easy for a powerful nation like America to overthrow a dictator. But it is very hard to predict the unintended consequences and the turmoil and the instability that follows after you overthrow that dictator. So I think Secretary Clinton and I have a fundamental disagreement. I'm not quite the fan of regime change that I believe she is.
Martha,
Well, but
this
I
is
would just
another case.
repeat that,
Secretary
wait a
Clinton.
minute, I think it's only fair to put on the record, Senator Sanders voted in the Senate for a resolution calling for ending the Gaddafi regime and asking that the UN be brought in, either a congressional vote or a UN Security Council vote. We got a UN Security Council vote. Now, I understand that this is very difficult, and I'm not standing here today and saying that Libya is as far along as Tunisia. We saw what happened in Egypt. I cautioned about a quick overthrow of Mubarak, and we now are back with basically an army dictatorship. This is a part of the world where the United States has tried to play two different approaches. One, work with the tough men, the dictators, for our own benefit, and promote democracy. That's a hard road to walk, but I think it's the right road for us to try to travel.
And Martha,
Quickly, Governor
in this
Malley.
case, and in this case, we probably let our lust for regime toppling get ahead of the practical considerations for stability in that region. And I believe that one of the big failings in that region is a lack of human intelligence. We have not made the investments that we need to make to understand and to have relationships with future leaders that are coming up. That's what Chris Stevens was trying to do, but without the tools, without the support that was needed to do that. And now what we have is a whole stretch shut now of the coast of Libya, 100 miles, 150 miles, that has now become potentially the next safe haven for ISIL. They go back and forth between Syria and this region. We have to stop contributing to the creation of vacuums that allow safe havens to develop.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move on here. Governor Malley, thank you very much for that. And we're going to make a very sharp turn as we wrap things up here. Secretary Clinton, First ladies, as you well know, have used their position to work on important causes like literacy and drug abuse, but they also supervise the menus, the flowers, the holiday ornaments, and White House decor. I know you think you know where I'm going here. You have said that Bill Clinton is a great host and loves giving tours, but may opt out of picking flower arrangements if you're elected. Bill Clinton aside, is it time to change the role of a president's spouse?
Well, the role has been defined by each person who's held it, and I am very grateful for all my predecessors and my successors, because each of them not only did what she could to support her husband and our country, but often chose to work on important issues that were of particular concern. Obviously, Mrs. Obama has been a terrific leader when it comes to young people's health, particularly nutrition and exercise, and I think has had a big impact. So whoever is part of the family of a president has an extraordinary privilege of not only having a front row seat on history, but making her or maybe his contribution. And with respect to my own husband, I am probably still going to pick the flowers and the china for state dinners and stuff like that, but I will certainly turn to him, as prior presidents have, for special missions, for advice, and in particular, how we're going to get the economy working again for everybody, which he knows a little bit about.
I do want to follow up here for each of you. And a similar line of questioning. Senator Sanders, your wife Jane shares an office in your campaign headquarters in Burlington. We've seen the pictures, the desks right next to each other. Would she have a desk close by in the West Wing?
Given the fact that she's a lot smarter than me, yes, she would. And let me, by the way, take this moment to congratulate Hillary Clinton, who I thought not only did an outstanding job as our First Lady, but redefined what that role could be. So I thank you very much for that. My wife, Jane, has been, way back when, before I knew her, a foster parent. Many, many kids came into her home and received the kind of love that they desperately needed, and she turned around many lives. She is the best parent and grandmother that I know. She has devoted her life. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, actually when I first met her, we started a youth office, which started after-school programs for kids, started a child care center, started a youth newspaper. We got the kids involved in a whole lot of issues. She led that effort. So I think at a time when so many of our kids are desperately looking for constructive activity, where too many of our kids are hanging around on street corners, potentially getting into trouble, I think we need a forceful advocate for the children, for teenagers, for the little children, to deal with a dysfunctional child care system. And I think my wife would do a great job in helping me accomplish those goals.
Senator, thank you. Governor O'Malley, you have talked about your wife, Katie, here tonight. She's a district court judge. And the question for you is, would she have to give that up as First Lady, or will she share an office in the West Wing as well?
Well, that would be totally up to her. I mean, Katie has never been a person who let her husband's professional choices get in the way with following her dreams. And I think she got that from her mother, actually. And I readily admit that she is a far more accomplished lawyer than I was ever able to become before I took my detour. She is a district court judge in Maryland. She puts in a full day there. We've raised 4 terrific kids, and yet, when she was First Lady of the state, not only would she go to work every day and sit there through a lot of sad and gut-wrenching cases, but then she'd put in additional time being an advocate against domestic violence. Maryland made great strides on that because of her advocacy and her understanding of how the court process works. She was an advocate against bullying and implementing anti-bullying things. So Katie O'Malley will do whatever Katie O'Malley wants to do, regardless of her husband's success in getting elected president.
Governor O'Malley, she'll like hearing that. Governor, thank you. We'll be back with much more from New Hampshire. The Democratic debate continues.
Here again are David Muir and Martha Raddatz.
Welcome back tonight. It's been an evening of lively discussion among the candidates, and it's time for closing statements. We began in alphabetical order, so we'll reverse the order at the end and begin with you, Senator Sanders.
Well, thank you very much for hosting this debate. And let me applaud my colleagues up here, because I think, frankly, maybe I'm wrong, but on our worst day, I think we have a lot more to offer the American people than the right-wing extremists today. My father came to this country from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket, which sparked my interest in the need for immigration reform, because I know what it's like to be the son of an immigrant. We grew up in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. My mother's dream, and she died very young, but my mother's dream for her whole life was to be able to get out of that rent-controlled apartment and own a home of her own. She never lived to see that. But what my parents did accomplish is they were able to send both of their sons to college. We were the first in the family. So I know something about economic anxiety and living in a family that does not have sufficient income. And that is why I am pledged, if elected President of the United States, to bring about a political revolution where millions of people begin to stand up and finally say, enough is enough. This great country and our government belong to all of us, not just a handful of billionaires. Thank you very much.
Governor O'Malley.
Martha, thank you. I want to thank all of the people who have tuned in tonight. I want to thank the great people of New Hampshire, where despite all of the cynicism about big money and big banks taking over our politics, here in New Hampshire, the individual matters. You know, my wife, Katie, and I have 4 terrific kids. And like you, there's probably nothing we wouldn't do to give them a future that's safer, that's healthier, where they have more opportunity than our parents and grandparents gave to us. Tonight, what you listened to was a healthy exchange of ideas about how we do that which we have always proven the capacity to do better than any nation in the world, to take actions that include more of our people more fully in the economic, social, and political life of our country. When you listened to the Republican debate the other night, you heard a lot of anger and you had a lot of fear. Well, they can have their anger and they can have their fear, but anger and fear never built America. We build our country by adopting wage and labor policies, including comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway of citizenship for all. We do it by investing in our country, by investing in infrastructure, by investing in the skills and the talents of our people with debt-free college, and we can do it again. And we also create a better future for our kids when we square our shoulders to the great challenges of our times, whether it's terror trying to undermine our values or Republican presidential candidates trying to get us to surrender our freedoms and our values in the face of this threat. The other big challenge we have is climate change. The greatest business opportunity to come to the United States of America in 100 years. We need to embrace this. I have put forward a plan that does this, that moves us to 100% clean electric grid by 2050. Join this campaign for the future. New leadership is what our country needs to move us out of these divided and polarized times. Thank you.
Governor, thank you. Secretary Clinton.
On January 20th, 2017, the next president of the United States will walk into the White House. If, heaven forbid, that next president is a Republican, I think it's pretty clear we know what will happen. A lot of the rights that have been won over years, from women's rights to voter rights to gay rights to worker rights, will be at risk. Social Security, which Republicans call a Ponzi scheme, may face privatization. Our vets may see the VA hospital that needs to be improved and made better for them turned over to privatization. Planned Parenthood will be defunded. The list goes on because the differences are so stark. You know, everybody says every election's important, and there's truth to that. This is a watershed election. I know how important it is that we have a Democrat succeed President Obama in the White House. And I will do all that I can in this campaign to reach out and explain what I stand for and what I will do as president. You know, I became a grandmother 15 months ago, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about my granddaughter's future. But as president, I will spend even more time thinking about the futures of all the kids and the grandchildren in this country, because I want to make sure every single child has a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential. If you will join me in this campaign, we will make that a mission. Thank you, good night, and may the force be with you.
Thank you to the candidates tonight. Thank you to the audience here in New Hampshire, here at St. Anselm. And thank you to the audience at home. We wish everyone at home a happy and safe holiday week ahead, and we wish all of you, the candidates, a happy and safe holiday with your families. George and the Powerhouse political team standing by with analysis. George, over to you.
Thank you, David. The force was with us, we hope, tonight. Thank you for that. Thanks for that great debate. And Matthew Dodd, I want to go to you first. The debate began with an apology from Bernie Sanders. It ended with agreement across the stage. Did it change anything?
No, I don't think it changed the dominance of this race and the structure of this race. Hillary Clinton came into this night with a big lead. She's going to go out of this night with a big lead. The fascinating thing to me about this debate is every one of the folks on that stage had their best night that they've had in this year. Hillary Clinton had
his best night.
I think Martin O'Malley had his best night. I think Hillary Clinton had her best night, and I think Bernie Sanders had his best night. And when that's the case, she walks out of here with a 28, 25-point lead.
And I thought with Bernie Sanders, especially on national security, in the previous debates, it seemed like he didn't even really want to get into it. He was much more focused on that issue. He went after Hillary and drew a line between her positions on the Iraq War back when she was in the Senate, her positions on Libya when she was Secretary of State, and what she wants to do now in Syria.
Right, and he said he was much less a fan of a regime change than she is. But again, she tried to stick to her position, saying it's a false choice to choose between the two, fighting ISIS, keeping Assad.
Clearly with an eye towards the general election. She was clearly, focusing. She defended her record there, but she also wanted to make the point that she's tough on foreign policy. That may not play all that well in a Democratic primary, but she wants to make that case in a general election.
And Donna Brazile, in fact, Secretary Clinton did pull a little bit of a Bernie Sanders on that issue of the data breach, accepted his apology.
She's accepted his apology. He apologized to his supporter. But you know what? Secretary Clinton was able to not just talk to Bernie Sanders on the issues like he's strong on the economy, Martin O'Malley, but you know what? She took on Donald Trump. And Democrats, that's what we're ready for. We're ready to take on the Republicans. And she proved tonight that she's ready, and of course the other two as well.
I should say that Donald Trump just tweeted me and said that I was stupid to believe that she wants to take on Donald Trump, that is just what she says. You think she really does?
Not only is Secretary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley, Donald Trump needs to understand that we Democrats, we're not going to cower like the Republicans when it comes to his bellicose rhetoric. We have a vision, and we know how to fight, too.
It is striking, Cokie Roberts, that his name was the only candidate's name that came up throughout the entire 90-plus minutes of this debate.
Well, I think it is true that they'd like to run against him, but it's also true that they want to make the point that Donna just made, that they're tough and that the Republicans are cowering in his shadow. That's been less true of late, particularly Governor Bush, but that has been the case up until now. But George, one of the things that Mrs. Clinton did tonight, which was not planned, obviously that last thing of "May the Force be with you" was planned, and it was clever. But when she was asked, should Wall Street love you? And she said,
everyone to love
everybody should love me. That was a very key moment.
Key difference with Bernie Sanders, but I want to get to Matthew right away. What do the Republicans do with this debate? Anything they see bother them tonight?
Well, I think on the Trump thing, whether they were intentional about it or not, I think Donald Trump in the Republican primary gains from this night. He actually is going to be better off because they attacked him in this, because what his voters and other Republicans are going to think is the only character is Donald Trump, and that's the guy that people are going to get behind.
And we will be right back.
No matter which mouth you feed on a two-headed snake, it still shits the same turd. But lucky for you, you have Mox News. More than 10 years. More than 60,000 videos. Mox News has been filtering the nonsense and illuminating the bullshit from your mainstream media. Turn off your TV and turn on to Mox News. For over a decade, documenting the socio-political events that have etched and carved the pathways that define today's modern mess, Mox News has been providing clarity while faithfully bringing you today's relevant stories 100% commercial-free and subscription-free. And just like Lady Liberty vows to remain free. But at this time, we're asking you for your help, your patronage, and your support to keep the lights on and the videos rolling. For less than 17 cents per day, you can become a basic subscriber, knowing that your donation is truly making a difference that will help continue bringing the news stories that make a difference in your life. Turn on, tune in, and drop a couple dimes today by clicking the link below or visiting moxnews.com and show your support at any level. From a single one-time donation or dedicated monthly subscriber, do it now in less than 2 minutes. All donations are safe, securely processed, and verified using PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or Discover Card. As always, we're sure you'll find something of interest each and every day. This holiday season, give the gift of Mox. moxnews.com.